7:30. It's all on ESPN. Coming to you live above the Heineken River Deck here in Pier 17. Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby. Jalen Rose, we all knew it was going to happen, but it officially happened. Nikola Jokic is the MVP of the NBA. While not a surprise, it does not mean he will not be celebrated by Jalen Anthony Rose.
No doubt about it. Oh, you see him hitting with the Smitty on the post. How about the skill that this man has? So you saw him do an off-the-dribble Smitty on the post. You see him shooting a three. You see him be the roller in the pick-and-roll action and finish at the hoop. You see him shooting the ball off his right leg as a right-handed player. He's the only guy in the league as a center that they literally initiate the offense through. Oh, and by the way, if you look at the league rankings, he's top whatever in every category because he's been that dominant. The person who was second, Joel Embiid, he also played almost about 20 games more than he did. So he was consistent from beginning to end. He helped lead the Nuggets whether Murray was in or out. Well deserving of the award for our guy, the Joker. Our guy, the Joker.
And Jalen, I see something happening in the NBA. The last center to win MVP was Shaquille O'Neal around the turn of the century. You mentioned it. Number one in voting was Jokic. Number two was Joel Embiid. And think about, look at Shaq. He was so dominant. Perhaps we will have a resurgence of big men in the NBA after we listen to the words small ball for so long. But we will need a resurgence from Nikola Jokic between Game 1 and Game 2 in the key series between the Nuggets and the Suns, because in Game 1, Nikola Jokic just wasn't aggressive enough. He needs to put some fouls on Aiden. He needs to find his shot. He needs to be aggressive. Jalen, what does he need to do?
Go towards the basket and look to score. He had 3 assists because they're able to stay at home. Without Murray and without Barton, Morris didn't have the kind of game that he had in the previous series where he put up 20 in back-to-back games. But the main thing that also has to happen besides the Joker being aggressive and scoring and trying to get Ayton into foul trouble so they can now go to Saric, so they can now go to Frank Kaminsky, I think he'll solve Crowder guarding him because he's just too skilled and too big for Crowder to guard him. But the thing that's got to happen for the Nuggets is Michael Porter Jr., slow down. Slow down, like the brand Nubians. Look at these shots. It's not that he can't make those shots. It's just that he's playing a hair faster than he normally does. So when you watch great players and we say he doesn't allow himself to get sped up, this is the opposite of that. He allowed that to happen to himself in the first game. I think if he slows down, continues to cut and move without the ball, get a couple of layups, get a couple of dunks, don't necessarily rely on the three-point shot to get his offense going, I think he'll perform much better in Game 2.
Yep, and there's also a couple things for the Suns that we need to point out. Number one that you want to celebrate is the guard play, what's happening in the backcourt in Phoenix.
The NCAA tournament it's the NBA playoffs. That's right. And Monty Williams played in the league. Shout out to my little brother, Willie Green, on the staff. They're doing a terrific job of developing talent. Here's what they've done. You add Chris Paul, the point guard, who's going to have high assists, low turnovers, and great decision-making, to go with Devin Booker, who's been a primary ball handler his entire career, and early in his career scored 70 points against the Boston Celtics. Jay Crowder, now I think about it, was on that team. Pretty sure they joke about that. And now all of a sudden you develop Cam into an asset. And so now he's playing quality minutes off the bench and knocking down his lefty three. And then Mikal Bridges. He's going to play defense, but now he's scoring the ball. He played well in Game 1. So having those 4 players are really going to be troublesome for the Nuggets. But I have a question for you. Where your guy Campazzo at? Where he at?
Dame ended Campazzo last series. Dame absolutely ended Campazzo last series. He is no longer there.
No, Chris Paul ended him in Game 1.
Well, in New Orleans, scored 45. What do you think about his performance to start the season?
He's a superstar, Jacoby, and he's already proven so this very young in his career. The same way when you look around the league and you see franchise-changing players like a Luka Doncic or a Ja Morant or a Zion Williamson, so many great young talented players, Trae Young. I could go on and on and on about the young players that have distinguished themselves so very young in their career. He's not only done that for the regular season as the Jazz had the #1 seed and broke the record for threes made per average per game, but also he's done it in the playoffs. He's had a 57-point game last year in the bubble. It was really his battle against Jamal Murray was epic. He was 15th this year in the MVP voting. Usually somebody that's on the #1 seeded team in the best conference, and currently that's the Western Conference, they get more love than that. But he turns his game up on this stage, and he does it in all facets. In particular without Mike Conley. When he has that ball in his hands, he's more electric. I know you can't just take the ball away from Conley because he's a seasoned vet. He flirted with a triple-double. He also needs the ball. But when Donovan has it, and he can play make for himself and for others, and he can pick and choose his spot, and his three ball is going, he's shown to be virtually unstoppable. He was the reason, literally, they won game 1. A superstar player playing the way he played against another 40-point performance versus the vaunted Clippers defense on the perimeter?
Yeah. We saw Luka do it last round, and it was Mitchell last night. But one person who needs to be pointed out, the gentleman by the name of Paul George, he was hearing overrated chants. He started the game like 2 for 12. He was part of the Clippers comeback. We have to give him credit for that. But Paul George, from once in a while in the playoffs, just has tough games. Why do you think that is?
There are two audiences as public figures that we entertain, as athletes, as media personalities. There's the linear audience, and then there's the social media audience. Like, every time somebody's trying to create something, they're trying to think of how to satisfy both of those audiences. And there are people that are liked by the linear audience, but are disliked by the social media audience. And there are people that are disliked by both, and or vice versa. Soon as Paul George starts struggling in a game, once he told the world that his nickname was Playoff P, now all of a sudden when he struggles, Playoff P is trending for all of the wrong reasons. Pandemic P is trending for all of the wrong reasons. When you're an all-NBA performer and you have multiple games where you shot under 25%, the audience is going to pay attention to that. And so you're right to point out the fact that Paul George can't be pedestrian if the Clippers are even going to make this a long series.
You mentioned earlier about the Jazz being the #1 seed, about how they broke the record for 3 points per game. But one thing that they don't get enough credit for is their defense. They were the #1 seed for a reason. One of those reasons was that defense. And that is also one of the reasons that Paul George struggled. And when people talk about the Jazz defense, they talk about one man, Rudy Gobert. But as you saw last night, it was a full team effort to limit Kawhi Leonard. Remember what Kawhi Leonard did games 5, 6, and 7 against the Mavs? To limit Paul George, to make things difficult for them. I love the Jazz defensive effort that they had last night, and I think that is what will propel them to make it difficult for the Clippers. But Jalen, holistically about this series, I don't know who's going to win. I think we're going to get 6 or 7 out of this one, don't you?
I believe the Jazz will win. I anticipate a long series, because they have so many guys like a Jordan Clarkson, who's going to be 6th man of the year, who are fearless. Like the Utah Jazz missed 20 straight shots in the first half. Found a way with that defense that you just highlighted to shoot themselves back into the game. And that level of cohesion of a core group of players playing together with Ingles and Bogdanovich and these guys that have been in the trenches together the last handful of years, and Favors and Gobert, you're able, and the same head coach who's done a terrific job of nurturing his team in Quinn Snyder, you now can draw on your principles. And that's what I saw versus a Clippers team that's still searching for an identity. It's a new series. Now, you're giving more minutes to Patrick Beverly. You're giving more minutes to Boogie, because what happens is you got to now walk into the locker room and tell those vets, hey, Y'all got to stay ready. I know I didn't use y'all in the first series, but I'm going to need y'all going forward. So now you're watching the game and they playing 12 players to start the game. You like, well, what happened? Well, they just had a 7-game series and they got to keep those guys engaged. So those things worked in the Utah Jazz favor also.
We now turn our attention to the Eastern Conference.